I want to do something slightly different in this video. Usually I present a topic, put forward an argument, and then reach a conclusion based on my argument. With this video, I will present the evidence and leave the conclusions up to you. There is too much speculation, too many possibilities for me to predict the future. I just don't know where the subject of animal sentience will take us. I have opinions and I have hopes and expectations, but as the saying goes, what will be, will be. A good starting point for the subject of animal sentience is the work of René Descartes, the French philosopher who lived from 1596 to 1650. He came to the conclusion that animals cannot reason or feel pain. Their behavior is automatic. He argued that only humans have consciousness and can learn and use language. Because animals were perceived as unfeeling machines, they were not deserving of compassion. Under this view, the exploitation of animals cannot be morally wrong, for you cannot harm machines. These views were influential in their time and for some time after. But time and ideas move on, and we now have a very different view on animal consciousness. The change in perception between seeing animals as machines and seeing them as having feelings did not happen overnight. It has been a gradual progression over time. Here is what Charles Darwin had to say about it in the 19th century. Quote, "There is no fundamental difference between man and animals in their ability to feel pleasure and pain, happiness and misery." End quote. For the last 120 years, it has been commonly accepted that animals experience a range of feelings and emotions. In other words, that they are sentient. Through much of the 20th century, scientists were more concerned with behavior than feelings, so sentience was a rather neglected area of study in biology and psychology. From the 1960s onwards, there has been an increasing concern about the welfare of animals and the stress that they experience as subjects for research, sport, and farming. The publication of the book Animal Machines by Ruth Harrison and the associated British government investigation known as the Bramble Report influenced views on animal welfare. Harrison's book was a product of her and the public's concerns about the suffering of animals in intensive agriculture, in biomedical research, and in product testing. It was not just the fact that these animals were stressed that troubled her. It was the fact that they were sentient and could feel stressed. An understanding of sentience became an essential part of assessing welfare. While sentience became an important consideration in the care of animals and informed animal welfare legislation, the next step was to recognize sentience in law. A small number of countries recognize animal sentience in law. A much larger number recognize animal sentience but have not passed laws. In 2019, for example, the Australian government started enforcing legislation that recognizes animals as sentient beings that are able to subjectively feel and perceive the world around them and possess intrinsic value. The European Union has long recognized animal sentience in law, and the United Kingdom was part of that legal framework, but is no longer because of their exit from the Union. As a result of leaving the Union, the United Kingdom government introduced a bill to legally recognize animals as sentient beings in May 2021. It is going through discussion stages at the moment. Now comes the difficult bit. What could be the consequences of legally recognizing animal sentience? I don't know. I can only speculate and consider the possibilities. Two issues that come immediately to mind are compliance and monitoring. People may resist new laws if they believe them to impact unfairly on them. Some may bend the rules or may go to considerable lengths to avoid being caught. We already know how dog extremists ignore laws that they feel impinge on their freedom. We already know how they present themselves as downtrodden victims if things don't go their way. If, for example, future science determines that keeping dogs in private homes stresses them, then we have to follow the science and stop that behavior. Dog owners would be expected to follow the science and give up their dog. It is highly unlikely that they will do so without an almighty fight. It will be a considerable ask getting dog owners to admit that they are the ones stressing their dogs and not fireworks, traffic, children, or the 1,001 other excuses. The Telegraph newspaper was concerned that the new legislation makes a departure from existing legislation and already goes too far. It described existing legislation as proportionate and purposeful, unlike this proposed bill on animal sentience. In praising existing animal welfare legislation, the Telegraph implied that the new legislation does not distinguish between pets and pests, between livestock and wild fauna, and they concluded that, quote, not all animals are equal, end quote. The idea that not all animals are equal is something that will have to be sorted out. At present, the provisions of the original bill stated that the word animal refers to all vertebrates except Homo sapiens. Most studies into animal sentience have been carried out on animals with backbones. Since invertebrates represent approximately 97% of the animal kingdom, this would be a major omission, but the discussion period allows for further additions. After evidence was presented by the London School of Economics, it has now been recognized that decapod crustaceans, including crabs, lobsters, and crayfish, and cephalopods, including octopuses, squid, and cuttlefish, are sentient beings. With the inclusion of cephalopods and crustaceans in this instance, could the concept of sentience grow to include other species, such as insects? Proposals to promote insects as a food source or as a replacement for animal feed are likely to raise questions about the nature of the insect mind and the consequences for farming. Dr. Jonathan Birch, a philosopher of science at the London School of Economics and Political Science in the UK, said, "We need new ways of thinking about sentience." He noted that, quote, "Evidence from other primates has been very influential on the science of human consciousness, but there has been a tendency to dismiss non-mammals. It's precisely the non-mammals that have been a source of a lot of recent discussion," end quote. Attempting to understand sentience in non-mammalian animals is going to bring about new challenges, new ways of thinking, and new methods of investigation. If the passing of animal sentience laws is going to bring additional scientific research, then it is likely that our future relationships with animals will be based on knowledge rather than basic observation, superstition, or wishful thinking. We could be entering a new era of animal understanding. Knowing more about how an animal feels and what it feels tells us about its interests, and that will inform our ways of interacting with that animal. One model of sentience does not fit all. That is something that is likely to become an increasing influence for academics and scientists in their areas of study. More time is likely to be spent studying particular individual species. I would think that the emphases are more likely to be placed on farm animals and pets for two reasons. One is that they are the animals that humans most commonly interact with. And the second reason is that these two groups of animals are associated with considerable financial costs, benefits, and profits. As the concept of animal sentience develops and more countries introduce the concept into law, it will impact increasingly on our relationships with animals and the way in which we interact with them. Knowledge of animal sentience will inform the purchase and transfer of animals and the harvesting of their products. It will influence how we care for both domesticated and wild animals. The use of animals for sport and the hunting of animals are likely to change in a variety of ways. As I said before, there will be resistance to many of these proposals, as interest groups feel that their long-established practices could be threatened. The British Association for Shooting and Conservation has joined forces with the Angling Trust to monitor the progress of the new legislation through Parliament. They are concerned animal rights extremists could potentially hijack the process and say that, quote, "we will be pushing for assurance from parliamentarians that the bill will not provide opportunities for those who wish to see an end to shooting and fishing," end quote. This is how seriously some groups see the concept of animal sentience legislation. The concerns that animal rights groups and activists will hijack the process is a criticism heard from different interested parties. An article in the Daily Mail reports that donors to the Conservative Party, the political party currently in power in the UK, have written a letter to the Prime Minister. The contents of this letter are summarized in the following way by the newspaper. Quote, "The government is facing a rebellion over the animal welfare sentience bill, amid concerns among some Tories that it could be hijacked by animal rights campaigners. Some fear it could be a Trojan horse for eco-zealots and affect farming, fishing, hunting, angling, and horse racing," end quote. I plan to spend more time discussing the possible impacts of animal sentience laws on pet keeping. Dog and cat owners are acutely aware that their pets are sentient. The evidence is easy to see in the daily lives of cats and dogs. Owners of other pets are also knowledgeable about the reality that their pets experience feelings, emotions, and react to pain. This does not have to be discussed. What does have to be discussed is the nature of their pet's sentience. Viewers of my channel will be well aware that I have discussed a very wide range of beliefs that pet owners, particularly dog owners, have about their pets. Their understanding of dog sentience is badly flawed for at least 3 reasons. The first reason is that they equate dog sentience with human sentience. Many dog devotees are open about it. They will say that dogs have human qualities. They believe that dogs think and feel the same way that humans do. Dogs think like dogs. They are sentient, but they are not like us. This belief leads to some acts that dog owners interpret as kindness, care, compassion, or admiration, but are likely to annoy dogs. For example, cuddling them or feeding them human food. Secondly, dog devotees interpret dog sentience from an intensely selfish standpoint. They say that dogs love us unconditionally. But what does that tell us about dog sentience? Little or nothing. It is an expression of what the dog can provide for the owner. People talk or write about having dog-shaped holes in their hearts, or how a dog completed their lives. This is about what they can get from the dog, and is not an attempt to understand the world of the dog. It is there to provide, not to be understood. The common phrase, "we don't deserve them," is an indication of this selfishness. The dog is there for the needs of the owner. They use deceptive language to disguise their true lack of concern for the inner world of the dog. The word symbiosis has become increasingly useful for people who want to camouflage the reality of the chasm of inequality that exists in the relationship between owner and dog. Another word used in this way is rescued. For example, I rescued him and he rescued me. I covered this in some depth in my video entitled Dog Rescue: Who Imprisoned Who? The idea of sentience is what can the dog give to me, rather than what does the dog need. Providing a fancy dress birthday party for a dog is not something that the dog wants or understands, but is something that the owner needs. The third flaw in their appreciation of dog sentience is in dignifying or exalting the motivations for dog behavior. Almost all dog behavior is described as having a noble motive. Their sentience is always evidence of righteous or virtuous motivation. A dog behaves in a particular way because it is guarding or protecting or being loyal. This leads to some very extraordinary motivations and abilities attached to dogs, such as telling the time, as in the case of Hachiko, or understanding human character, or remaining steadfast after death, as in the case of Hachiko and Greyfriars Bobby, or acting as a firefighter. An effort to understand the world of the dog rather than the world that the owner dreams about would bring different conclusions from the ones mentioned. For example, I have discussed the firefighting dog story several times. A more rational explanation would be that a barking dog is expressing its fear and its need to escape. Let me expand on this last point by telling a ghost story. The mystery of the dog suicide bridge. There's a bridge at Overtoun House near Dumbarton, Scotland, which has been the site of a number of mysterious dog deaths. Since 1960, a number of dogs have jumped to their deaths from the bridge. So far, this is true. The number of dogs has been debated, but I have read estimates from 50 to 1,000 dogs. The number 50 is more likely, so I will stick with that. 50 dogs jumping off the same bridge over a 60-year period is a significant mystery. One dog owner whose dog died said, quote, "Something overcame Bonnie as soon as we approached the bridge. Bonnie froze, then became possessed by a strange energy and ran and jumped right off the parapet." End quote. Another reported that, quote, "It happened instantly. My dog cleared the parapet wall without even touching it. Something went through it like a poltergeist." End quote. This is spooky. Dogs seem to have the ability to sense ghosts. One theory is that it is the ghost of Lady Overtoun, who roamed the grounds of her house, consumed by grief after her husband died in 1908. There are two flaws here. Humans usually jump off bridges for three reasons. These are thrills, fear, or depression. We can exclude thrills, so we are left with depression and fear if we wrongly attribute human sentience to dogs. Looking at the story from a dog point of view, we can reach a different conclusion. A likely possibility is that there is something on the other side of the parapet that dogs are interested in. They jump over without looking because they don't know what's on the other side. They are most likely motivated by something they smell, and that is most likely droppings from mink that inhabit the stream below the bridge. The point is that considering dog sentience is likely to lead us to different interpretations of dog behavior. This is something that may develop from acceptance of animal sentience in law. The acceptance of animal sentience in law and the associated scientific studies that develop from it may not bring about the end of pet keeping, but it may bring about the beginning of the end. When will this happen? I don't know. Will it change practices of keeping pets in inappropriate environments? I don't know that either. I leave it to you, and I'm interested in your considered opinions of what the animal sentient future might bring, and hopefully the future is pet-free.